I'm making this interview available to anyone who's interested, but it's aimed specifically at anyone at Palantir who can decide whether or not I could possibly evaluate Foundry. So if that's you, please give me just 1 minute of your time. Hi, my name's Alex. I used to be a rocket scientist at MIT before starting a YouTube channel that focuses on helping investors understand advanced technology. During my time at MIT, I worked on signals analysis programs that make real-time decisions based on huge streams of multi-channel, multi-sensor data. Think radars and optics. Over the last year or so, I've built a community on YouTube of over 150,000 people who are genuinely interested in understanding the future and the technologies taking us there. I really believe that includes the platforms that Palantir is building. If you'd allow me, I feel I could build real value on top of Foundry, both as an independent developer and as a content creator. I'd love to work with you to share my take on it with my passionate, thoughtful, and curious community. You can check the description below for a playlist of my existing Palantir content, which has amassed hundreds of thousands of views on my main YouTube channel, which is called Ticker Symbol U. Thank you for your consideration. The following 90-minute interview is between me and Codestrap, who has appeared on several other YouTube channels to share what he can about his experience with Palantir. This interview is unscripted, it's unedited, and it contains some unsavory language. It's nerdy and dense, but talking with Codestrap helped me understand Palantir's technology in a new way. I hope it helps you too. Your time is valuable, so here's the full interview. So yeah, man, let's just start from the beginning. Like, who are you and how the heck did you get a hold of Palantir,
Oh,
Foundry?
this is funny. So I'm a software engineer by trade. I've been doing it for 20 something years. And oh, I think I lost you. You still there?
Oh, sorry, you're just full screen.
All right, got it.
Yep.
And I'd spent about 5 years dealing with a lot of the problems that like Palantir is trying to solve, right? So like having this like hands-on experience of like dealing with all of the issues related to ML and AI initiatives, with not the least of which is like the data engineering problems and actually trying to make something operational. And a lot of the people that come into data science initiatives, they're from universities typically. Like we recruit a
Yep.
lot from academia, right? So like they're not like production engineers. They've never worked on a production system before, so it's like they're really good at the science. They're not like they need a whole engineering support staff to like actually make anything operational. Yeah, so
That's
there you
right.
go. Like
Yeah, for
similar
sure.
to your background, right? So like um, and so like having been through this process, I totally got it. Like the minute I heard about Foundry and Palantir, I was like, oh yeah, like we need a solution like this, and we need it now. And also just projecting out in the future where things are going, we have a lot of legacy IT debt that big data is butting up against, and that's that whole ERP space. And so I had automatically just kind of like in my mind, over a year ago, I kind of envisioned like a platform like this would be highly disruptive to ERP and legacy IT debt because everyone's trying to get out their data and like the ERP systems are holding it hostage. And so like I came out with this video a long time ago called Palantir's Value Explained. It was like the first video I did before their very first demo day. And I kind of laid out my case for where software is going, which is humans at the edges, and like sort of not like we're moving away from human-centric software, so these sort of human at the edges, and a lot of things being driven by surfacing signal data, so that through the use of models, so that we can leverage automation, possibly on the blockchain, to replace a lot of the traditional sort of human-centric workflows that take place in existing ERP systems. And I think that vision, it was just kind of shared, like it's because I had lived all the pain of like trying to make all this work before. We had a similar vision of the future that like, and a lot of luck, like in terms of the people I was able to meet through my work. Like it's like 50% luck, 50% like sharing a common vision and knowing how this platform can be used and the problems it solved before kind of a lot of people figured that out. Um, and so I think that's just how it happened. And it's funny is like the people at Palantir were telling me, like they had, I didn't know they knew about my YouTube channel, like when I was working with them at work. But I eventually found that out. It was really funny. It was a cool story, and that really helped accelerate the relationship, I think, because they were open to what I was saying, and they
Sure.
were they were supportive of what I was saying. So I was like, oh, that's cool. That really means like that's a big validation of sort of all those premises I had. And then again, having this like shared vision of where kind of everything is going. you know.
So is that the fundamental driver for Palantir is to be super competitive in resource planning specifically, or I think you
No,
mentioned on a. Oh, go ahead.
no, I think they're just the driver for Palantir is they've got a big baseball bat and they're about to like slam everything with it, right? It's like a highly
Yeah,
disruptive technology, right? So
yeah,
so the big driver for Palantir is like I think more like let's really solve the foundational problems that people don't know they have. It's a lot like if you look at a problem in quantum physics, right? So like you don't know that there might be this more fundamental layer of reality you can't see. Like maybe we're talking about quantum fields, right? So like
yeah.
and that's what's happening in business is like there's all these surface level problems that people are trying to solve, but they don't realize there's just like more foundational, more meaningful problem underneath it, which is like how do you operationalize data? You know, how do you use your business move at the speed of the data stream? And Palantir knows how to solve that problem, but that's going to disrupt a lot of things. So like Palantir's motivation is how do we get customers to understand the fundamental problem, the more foundational problem,
Do
you
you
know,
think that they're doing so? Like, let's
in my
just talk
opinion.
about high level Palantir for a second,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, in my opinion, as an investor who has never touched Foundry, I think Palantir does a terrible job of identifying here's what we do, who we're for, and why we work so well. Like, we're disruptive because of X, the way we're moving the needle is because of Y, and the
Yep.
reason people should be paying attention to us today is because of Z. Can you help me understand X, Y, and Z in that sentence? What Palantir is doing, what they're so clever at, why they're so disruptive, who they're going to be disrupting, those high level sort of what is Palantir's place in the world today questions?
Yeah, I can, but just understand like I'm not speaking on behalf of Palantir. Like these are my interpretations. So I just want people to
Absolutely.
be like totally clear on
Yep.
that.
And neither of us have anything to do with Palantir other than
Yep.
outside observers with maybe a little bit of evaluation insight other than
Yep.
that.
Exactly.
Totally.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So like the first part of that question is like, what are they doing, right? Like, what is the thing that they're doing?
Yes.
All right. So what they're doing is coming in and offering a holistic platform that like your business is now going to operate on, and it's a lot like the shift from like sort of the old operating systems of computers to like a Windows or a Mac. You know, so like what they're doing is transferring people from one way of working and one set of tools over to a new way of working and a new set of tools that are much more powerful to operate on massive amounts of data and then transform your workflows to move at the speed of that data. And so like the it's both a change for the organization in my opinion, like in the way you operate. So you're going to have to maybe restructure workflows or teams to be or and to acquire new skills, but it's also like a change in displacing like 50 other SaaS products, right? So like um, there's a lot of like existing stuff that you use today. Like I could think of like 50 SaaS products probably that Palantir is displacing, you know, and it's a shift away from maybe some of those tools. And you know, people don't always like that shift. You know, they might like the
Sure.
tools they use, but shifting over, like I literally just got off a call with them where we had this conversation with our ML engineers. You know, like you may have had a way you did this before and these tools you liked, but Foundry's got a better way for you to do it with better tools, you know? But that's a shift in their mindset. They have to be willing to move away from some things that they've used before and move on to these other tools that are much, much better when integrated into like a true operating system for big data. So it's the organization is changing as a result of what they're bringing in, along with maybe some of the traditional SaaS platforms or tools that you'd use to solve problems. But by bringing that into a holistic ecosystem, the organization is now able to get business value out of all these initiatives, like almost immediately. Like the time frame we were given to get business value out of this large scale ML ops initiative we have was 2 weeks, down from a year and a half. You
Whoa.
know?
So that's almost like backwards of what I would expect. Let me just
Yeah.
like rewind what you just said.
Yeah.
It's a whole big paradigm shift. It's a whole new suite of tools based on looking at things in real time, like at the speed of data, instead
Yep.
of, collectively and then analyzing some existing corpus of data.
Yep.
I would expect that paradigm shift to come with a huge cost of moving over from legacy to Palantir, from existing workflows to brand new ones. Can you explain a little bit about how the time to value is so short?
Yeah. So, and I don't know if I would frame it as like there's a huge cost. Um, like
Okay.
the cost difference is negligible. So like the as far as like actual dollars, um, we're in the same order of magnitude of spend if we
Yeah,
just
sorry, I'm thinking like literal time. Like I have an
oh,
existing process today, and you're saying
okay,
I'm
got
about
it,
to
got
move to
it.
something completely new, right?
Yeah, got it. All right. So like, for example, if when you're doing engineering, right, like the more tools you have to glue together, the more complex your system generally becomes, and the clunkier it sort of is. So like, let's take data pipelines as just one use case. Right now, if I'm writing like Spark code, there's this challenge of like the developer working on their local workstation, then getting that code into production, then actually running it on the EC2 instances that it needs to run on, then actually observing the whole thing, then actually testing changes to that code and making sure that we have a way to like review the changes and verify that all the quality checks pass and all of that. And there's like 5 or 10 different, or actually it's closer to 10 different products to sort of operationalize that one part of the stack, which is the data
Whoa.
pipeline, right? So like, but when you sit down in Foundry to do a data pipeline, you literally work in a web-based IDE, write the code, and you use decorators in your Python code to do the exact same thing, right? So like instead of gluing together 10 products and taking you like months to put that together,
Yeah.
and then the deployment process taking forever, you write it in Foundry and hit the build button, and the same thing magically happens and all your infrastructure is provisioned for you.
Well,
Like,
it's like even better than that, right? Because if there's
yeah,
10 products and one link breaks in that chain,
yep,
there's some interface that changed or some
yep.
revision that you're
Which
not
happens
accounting
all the
for.
time, by the way, as dependencies update. So like, yeah,
Whoa. Yeah,
yeah,
got it. Okay, sorry. Go
yeah.
go on. I
So
might
that's just
stop you a
one.
lot like over the
No
interview, but
problem. No.
that's super
But
interesting. Yeah.
but then let's take so in one thing to back up a little bit. You have to recognize there's a whole set of actors in this ecosystem. So you have like engineers are one set of actors, but you also have
Yep.
data analysts. You also
Yep.
have just non-technical folks who work in Excel, who work
Yep.
in Google Docs all day, right? So like it's basically every person in your organization will now operate on this platform. Just keep in mind it's a large pool of actors. So like, what about the next problem? Okay, like I have a set of data analysts that heavily leverage Excel, and they get copies of data sets out of our data warehouse, and they will put them into reports in Excel often. Like, why do people still do that? Well, a lot of reasons, right? Like, but Excel spreadsheets are still relatively portable, and everyone can read them, and they
Yeah,
have a
right.
use case, right? But in Foundry, there's a product that replaces that, right? And but why would you want to do that? Well, because I can run it against my entire data lake, right? So like I'm running on terabytes of data for Excel now, which is
So
fucking
it's
mind
a
blowing.
so it's like a Excel view almost of the data lake. It's not, hey, here's data in Excel. It's I'm giving you this lens to see your data through that looks like a
Well,
spreadsheet.
it's
Is that
it's a
kind of like
spreadsheet pro. It's literally a spreadsheet program. Like, have you ever used Sheets in Google, like
yeah, of
in
course.
Google
Yep.
Docs? Yeah, exact same type of program. But instead of you having to go out and try and find some way to get meaningful production data that out of it, whether that's from pulling it out of Google Analytics or it's pulling it out of your data lake over here or pulling it out some other thing, it's literally tapped into the data fabric of the org. So I can look at all of my data in a spreadsheet now, and I can.
So
It's pretty freaking crazy.
that's awesome. And like
Yeah.
I think the implied statement here is there's different actors. There's the spreadsheet view. I'm sure we're going to talk about a few other views.
Yep.
My understanding is the way Palantir does permissioning is at the like molecular level of the
It
data,
is
which means if you
correct.
open your spreadsheet, you can only see columns and rows that you are allowed to
Correct.
see. The next
Yep.
guy his, the next guy his. So you guys can open the same exact spreadsheet. Hey, I want to see this view of the data. And if you have different levels of clearances for whatever the data is, you'll actually see the appropriate two different versions of a similar spreadsheet.
Yeah, correct. That's my understanding. I haven't seen that in action yet, but yeah, they have a redaction system built into the platform so that like if you are only allowed to see these cells, they can redact that, which is really cool.
That is, yeah, sorry. That and like that's a really practical problem that
Yeah.
businesses don't think about until they're like, wait, it's the
Yeah.
11th hour. I
Yeah.
can't show this guy revenue numbers. What
Yeah.
do I do now? And in Palantir, it's like, hey, this guy can't see this column or
Well, the most
data
obvious
of this type.
solution that happens to that problem is like they share it anyway. So that's
Yeah,
that's how
touche,
most people
touche.
solve that problem. Yeah. Yeah.
That's super interesting. Sorry, go on. So now there's the spreadsheet view. There's different actors. There's different ways of looking at the data in the spreadsheet's one
Well, and
example.
then there's this whole reporting program, right? Which is like a total Tableau replacement. So it's like that you have the spreadsheet thing, then there's this other module that does like awesome visualizations and reports. But again, does it on massive amounts of data with a holistic security governance data governance platform built into it, right? But then there's this other thing called Workshop, which is like you can be a non-technical user and you don't need an engineering team to build React applications for line of business apps anymore. They built, like, let me put it this way, they built Skywise on top of Workshop, you know? So like you can build full-on Foundry modules like in Workshop and distribute those as full-blown applications, you know, which is mind-blowing when you think about it, because let's imagine I have Foundry running across my org. We're operating in 10 different regions, right? I can have a team of non-technical users make an entire application that actually does stuff, right? Writes to the database, responds to alerts. There's all these really cool things that you can do through the ontology layer that Workshop is built on. And then they can distribute those to every other location where Foundry is installed. So like all my other Office divisions. So like I've got now non-technical people who don't really write code. They might have the same level of skill as an Excel jockey, producing full-blown React applications that operationalize everything in my organization under Foundry. You know, so like you don't need an engineering team to go in and now build all your line of business apps that would have traditionally been used to try and make sense out of what you've got in your data lake. You can build it in Workshop, which
So
is also
Palantir like enables the common man to build microservices. Is that kind of how I'm
yes,
like?
100%. It's not just it's not microservices. It allows them to build entire end-to-end applications that would have traditionally consumed those microservices. So like typical developer stack today, you know, where you're like starting with React and then maybe you're building some Node.js or Go microservices to get at your data, and then the client is connecting to those services, and that's how you're doing all your read writes. And they actually
Yeah.
have a really cool system that is really in line with like what we call domain driven design, where like you actually operate through a domain model and all your services operate with objects in the domain model. And this is really powerful for modern architectures. We're doing like CQRS or event sourcing, which is like there are ways in which you leverage eventual consistency to your advantage, so you can make things faster in your application layer, and you can also cleanly decouple like the client side from the server side. And
Yeah.
so, but they have it out of box. Like their entire Workshop platform for building low no code apps is meant to interact in this domain driven design kind of paradigm with the ontology layer. Hence, you get this really clean, beautiful architecture like right out of the box, and no engineers had to build it.
Yeah. So like just in case that will ever make it into a video, let me
Yep,
back up and try to explain that in like human words, right?
yep,
So
yep,
uh the way modern code should work is like it should take data in real time and do stuff as it detects events, right? Like
correct.
what does that actually mean? It means, hey, I'm not going to pull and ask for data every second if I'm a financial system, right?
Yep,
I'm going to wait for a transaction to occur, and that's going to change the state of my business, right? My shopping
correct.
cart specifically, my checkout, whatever, the
Yep,
actual
yep,
something has state changed. When that
exactly.
happens, I
Exactly.
need to kick off processes, use that data in a certain way. And then a whole bunch of different people might need to know different things about that thing, right?
Yep,
Some data analyst cares about, hey, what is the total size of the shopping cart? Some QA person or some customer satisfaction person might care about what items just got ordered. The CEO might care, hey, this is our biggest order yet. So different people care about that same data and different pieces of that data for very different reasons, and not all of them should see all of that data. And so
100%.
Palantir in real time is like keeping track of that data coming in and making sure the right pieces get to the right places in front of the right eyeballs, for lack of a better way of explaining it at the 0th level, right? Like
Exactly, 100%. You're the first person I've explained that to that actually accurately kind of reflected in a ducks and bunnies way of like what's
yeah,
actually
right. Yeah, ducks and bunnies is a great way of saying it.
happening.
Sorry. So and like,
Yeah,
not just my
yeah,
editor who will see this, but
yeah,
like me seeing this and being like, "Wait a minute. I understood this at the time, but
yeah,
like
yeah,
so
yeah.
okay. Now I'm with you. Go ahead."
Cool, cool. So like that I mean, when I figured that out, that sort of like just blew my mind, because I was like, the amount of work we have to do to do that eventing model, you know, and like get it to all
Yeah.
propagate back downstream to where like all the data sources are. One, it's a distributed systems nightmare, right? Because like if you're trying to actually manage that yourself, there's a good chance you're going to catch like a fraction of the, or a large part of the cases, but you're going to have this long tail problem of cases you didn't catch, but then your data's screwed, you know? So it's like, that's not a fun
Yeah.
problem to have to solve.
Yeah.
And then I was also thinking, like in my head, I was like, wow, like just having the domain model, like the ontology system in place, solves all these other ancillary problems we had, which was like, one, we wanted to bring all of our data into a universal system because it was fragmented across our org. But the other was like, there's all these ML capabilities that you can enable once you have like a real graph of your data in this kind of like format. So like a lot of the machine learning models that can take advantage of graph theory, like recommendations engines or other types of things, were also propelled forward by that, which was really cool. So I was like,
Yeah.
wow, that's really cool. Like,
Yes.
yeah,
Have you ever heard of Wolfram Alpha?
no,
Okay, so Wolfram Alpha is purely academic, which, the special thing about Wolfram Alpha, I believe, is they actually do this. Obviously, not at a production level.
yep, yep,
They're meant for like academics and all that. But like, I think Wolfram's big insight was you can turn anything into a graph theory problem,
pretty
and
much.
when you do that, now all the graph theory tools are a potential solution to your problem because you've changed the nature of the problem.
Exactly.
Is that what
Exactly.
Palantir is doing at a production level, like fundamentally?
I mean, I see that. I don't want to get too far ahead because until I've actually done it in production, I don't want to say like
Sure, yeah,
yes,
sure.
100%. But like yes, I think that is the case at this point in time, and I think that that's right. Like I've been talking a lot with people who like various graph database vendors and whatnot, and like graphs are eating software. Like I don't know if people know that, but like graphs theory has become made this huge comeback like in the engineering space, and a lot of problems like if you turn them into graph problem like can take advantage of graph theory, even like spam detection and
Absolutely,
uh,
yep.
like when
Hmm.
we're doing content moderation, there's huge applications now in machine learning taking advantage of graph theory. And so like graphs are like eating software, man. It's really crazy. In front end applications like GraphQL from Facebook was designed to solve overfetching problems we have where like you're making
Yeah,
50
more data
requests to
than
get.
you need. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, exactly. But like with a graph, you can cleanly get the related chunks of data under a query, So like it has applications there. And so my mind just started like racing as I was thinking about the applications of the ontology beyond even what Palantir maybe had envisioned originally, like it would be used for. I know that they knew it would be used for ML, but I don't know if they realized how much of a problem it solves in front end React applications or other types of applications. Because the problem with GraphQL is like there isn't a graph database typically behind it. You might spin up Neo4j, or you might spin up dgraph or some other graph database, but like that's not a real solution in most cases. And it
Yeah.
can work, but it's not as powerful as having it tapped into the data fabric because the problem with that solution is like your graph database is usually a read-only store, like a read-only copy, whereas like the ontology in Palantir is like you can do everything through the ontology layer, including so.
How can I elegantly explain this ontology layer to an investor? Like,
Ooh,
I'm putting my senior data scientist at
yeah,
MIT hat on, and I'm half getting it, right? Like, I
yeah,
have an
yeah,
analogous example from my work experience that no one can relate to.
yeah.
How do we open the floodgates and say, hey, this is like some abstraction layer that turns data into X? How do we solve this problem for investors?
I think the best approach, the way I would try to explain, is the digital twin concept because what they collect through the ontology is not only the graph and the data, but it's also behaviors. So like they can actually they can detail how this entity, this object in your ontology behaves. Like what can it do, and how does that interaction propagate throughout the rest of the ontology, right? So like it's really like a true digital twin where if I give your organization input, I can watch your organization respond to that input, right? So like if I want to perturb the model by giving it input,
Yeah.
right. Now you can start to think of your organization as almost like a weather model where you can simulate what will happen if you give it inputs, like your factory over here shutting down or like this supplier going bankrupt.
It's the fact. Yeah, I like the factory analogy. So, like, let me
Yeah.
imagine we threw all the data of a Tesla Gigafactory into Palantir Foundry, and then we kicked one of the robots really hard and it broke. What does that do to everything downstream of that robot, the
Yep.
output of the Gigafactory, the little modules that robot should have built but didn't,
Yep.
in detail, right? So, for example, that robot worked on the battery cells of the battery down the line or something, and now we
Yep.
delete that robot. That's an incomplete part now. So
Yep.
other things will keep happening to that part, and that error will manifest in weird ways over time, right? Hey, you have this almost complete but incomplete car. This robot somewhere down the chain is looking for a part that didn't make it into the car. All
Yep.
these other things aren't exactly in the right place. They need to be downstream. What specifically happens when I delete this robot? What Palantir helps do is take that data and organize it and operate it on it in a way where you can ask questions like that. When I do this
Yep.
specific action, what ripple effect happens to the rest of my organization based on everything we can see in the data. Is that like a
100%.
fair? Okay.
Yeah, it's totally fair. And like that, they have a simulation engine in there for running those what if scenarios. And that's how Ferrari has been heavily leveraging the platform as well. That they've been running those what if scenarios. They typically take about, I think in their analogy was like 8 hours to run a full what if scenario on their cars. But they could run multiple what if scenarios over, when they leave for work, and they would run at night and they'd go through the full simulation. And then they can the next morning have the results and then pick one of those simulations that had the best predictions, and then they would adapt the car to like what was happening there. So that's pretty mental when you think
Yeah.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can imagine one level higher where it's like, I'm going to do a Monte Carlo simulation. I'm going to do that
Yep.
simulation 55,000 times and statistically,
Yep.
okay.
Yep. The
Uh,
only limit is like how much money you want to kind of spend on the compute. So it's kind of crazy.
so is Palantir's, so now that I have a better understanding of this, does Palantir charge per compute? No, like what is the structure
So
of,
can't talk about
all
it.
this computing? How does Palantir make money off of this
I can't
capability?
talk about it. So
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't know
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Um,
No, I can't divulge any details about like the contracts, the pricing, or
got it.
how they make
Okay.
money, but they do make
I,
money.
for sure. Sorry, I didn't know that before this conversation
Yeah,
started.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So what does this? So okay, that's one great application is like Ferrari.
Yep.
Let's take a step back. One thing you said that I think should really excite investors that I had the feeling for and you confirmed is Palantir is a giant hammer and it's really good at turning everything into a nail. Is that fair? Like one of the things
No,
that
I
it's
I don't
okay.
think that's fair. I think there's still like a lot of like they've even built their platform so that it's open and extensible. So like for example, if I happen to really like Databricks because I dig their features, right? I want to
Yeah.
use Delta and I want the pay version of Spark that they offer. Like Databricks is a first class citizen in Foundry. So like you can bring in Databricks models and they're first class citizens deployed through the same ML ops layers. So they recognize like there are tools that are really good at solving specific problems that engineers really like, and they want to be open to
Oh.
those tools. And so there are integration layers for things like Snowflake and Databricks inside of Foundry. And so it's not the giant hammer necessarily.
Got it. No, that's super useful. So it's not trying to recreate all these solutions to be integrated into Foundry. It's saying, hey, we'll let you integrate with the things you already use, and we have an interface layer that will make it work with Foundry.
For certain things, where they recognized early and correctly that there are reasons you might want to adopt some of these other solutions. And then the other would be like, how do you interoperate downstream with the things coming out of Foundry? So like, for example, I have a really good model, right? And I want to deploy that model, say, as a microservice to get inferences from it on AWS. But I might have really large concurrency issues, or I may want to use like a custom Docker container to deploy it for some reason.
Yeah.
They have a way in which you can still maintain operational support for that thing, but you can deploy it outside of Foundry and it'll run like in your own provisioned cluster with auto scaling, whatever you want, however you want to deploy it. So they give you a lot of flexibility there as well, because sometimes to operationalize that model and get inferences from it, you might want a highly customized environment. Or the other one might be like running it on device, like want to deploy the thing at edge.
Yeah, embed. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Which they fully support, by the way. So they have like they were very smart and forward thinking about like what tools they would need to integrate with and what types of operational scenarios they would need to support. So it's not like this full black box in that sense. Another good example is like actual ML models from companies. So like at my work, we heavily rely on some stuff from Azure, and Microsoft. But there's also other companies like I think there's one Big Bear AI that they work with. But there are companies who specialize in certain base models, and you just do some transfer learning, and you'll customize those base models to your use case, and they fully support that sort of thing too. And in fact, I think that's the future we're really heading to. Is like I actually had a conversation with my director of ML today about this. That like we really believe that auto ML and transfer learning is the leading indicator that the models are going to be the commodity, and that really the platform for managing the data and the operations is what's going to win, because like we're already
Oh.
highly leveraging auto ML and transfer learning. And a lot of companies specialize in just these discrete problems and solve that through this suite of models that they offer. So it's like, it's kind of crazy when you think about it. But Palantir was really smart about the way they thought about that way before anyone else figured that out.
I wonder, like, so that sounds to me like one of the things that I really misunderstood about Palantir is kind of its exact role and its nature in the enterprise.
Yep.
Um,
So did I.
one thing I, yeah, yeah. So it's like one thing I think that you said on actually Tom Nash's show, which
Yep.
was really smart, is like everything you just said makes Palantir so sticky, right?
Oh yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so a lot of organizations I'm starting to worry are going to be like, hey, we can't afford to depend on one thing that much, right? Like,
Oh
do
yeah.
you see that as a real, like, is Palantir's biggest risk itself then? Like, hey, there's
No.
some organizations that will never adopt it because then they'll always be beholden
Those
to it. Like,
organizations are gonna be out of business though, dude. Like I mean, that's like the resistance to computers. That's why I told them too, like in that same interview, I was like, people were resistant to computers when they came out, and the ones that were and never adapted got put out of business because they were such marginal producers at that point. You couldn't compete. So like this is the natural adoption curve of every disruptive technology I've ever dealt with, is that there is a resistance to it. And it just so happens that the risk profile is something that people will center in on, when in reality they're probably just scared of change at that point, you know. But like they'll use that risk profile analogy you talked about, which is like, oh man, this thing's going to penetrate everywhere, we have no replacement, we're screwed if we have to move away from it. But I'm like, how's it any different than AWS? You spent 5 years
yeah,
building your entire
right.
business on AWS. You know,
Yeah.
AWS can shut you down if they want to. I mean, they're like an unelected board member, you know, like if they just decide they want to remove your workload and not adhere to their own terms of service, they do that, you know? So like,
That's a great point.
yeah, yeah. And people don't think about it. They're just like, oh, I didn't really think about it that way, you know?
Yeah,
But like
I didn't really think about it. Yeah.
At least with Foundry, I can run that same workload on Azure GCP. I can run on AWS. I can run it on-prem. It's all deployed through Apollo. Who can do that with their AWS workload right now? Can they take their AWS workload and just magically port that over to GCP or Azure?
Yeah, so you're right. So in a weird way, like Palantir kind of de-risks some of the things that you
Exactly.
have like kind of over centralized today.
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
that's so Kathy Wood made this like really interesting, poignant point in an interview a while ago where she was saying, "Hey, the real people Palantir is trying to displace is it's like bringing computing away from centralized clouds to the edge,
Yep.
or at least like, you know, decentralizing some of that compute." I think
Yep.
that's exactly what you just said too. It's like now you're not
Yep.
beholden to the one cloud compute solution you
Exactly,
stood
dude.
up on.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's so
That's
that's like a
the sky compute is what that's being referred to in the industry, like sky computing. So yeah.
I've never heard that term before.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
blowing my mind a little bit, but it makes total. So that means there's some
Yeah.
little. That means I guess this would be Apollo, right? If there's some little abstraction where that says, "Hey, I
Exactly.
know, like you're on this. Here's how you do that. Oh, you're
Yep.
moving to this. Here's how you do. Oh,
Yeah.
that's a
Right.
yeah, that's a Apollo. Okay, like I'm seeing how. So when you get Foundry, do
Yep.
you also like? Maybe I just misunderstood Apollo. You always get Apollo no matter what. That's like the found.
No,
No, okay.
well, because they use it internally to deploy Foundry in their SaaS environment. So like when we signed up for when we provisioned our environment, it was provisioned in this multi-tenant like SaaS environment they maintain, and you can like choose where you want it. You know, do you want it deployed in AWS? Do you want GCP? Do you want Azure? Do you want all of them? Do you want on-prem? Like you can determine like how things get deployed. But it's running in their accounts, you know. Like it's not running in our we're not the customer. There is a version of it in which you can run it yourself in your own accounts and stuff.
Yeah.
But they're deploying it all through Apollo, and that's their infrastructure solution for Foundry. But I don't get Apollo out of the box, right? Like that's not even I don't even believe that's part of a lot of the lower end offerings that they offer.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
So it's like they have Apollo to handle how things get distributed for your org. Like they help you
Yep.
do that. If
Yep.
you're a big enough enterprise, they'll
Yep.
stand up your Apollo for you so you can do your distribution
That's my
management.
understanding. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
That helps a
It's a
lot.
very
Like,
high end product. Like I think people have really underestimated how valuable Apollo is. Like it's solving so many problems related to trying to do edge AI, and it's
yeah.
like it's
Yeah,
mental what
that
it can do. Yeah.
it's a nightmare. So like
Yeah.
that kind of stuff as an academic or a former academic, I guess.
Yep.
I was a radar engineer, so I
Yep.
was a rocket scientist that worked on the radar that watches rockets, and deploying code to that radar. Like, okay, I got to get it off
Yep.
my machine and have it standalone run on this embedded system
Exactly.
separate of like the internet and like all this other stuff, that is no joke. That's like
Yeah.
a
Total
serious
mission.
nightmare to do. So
Yeah.
having a system like, sorry, I'm trying to like relate this to A, myself, but B, investors again, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
having a system that can take code and put it on a unusual device at the edge, a satellite, a robot, a
Exactly.
drone, a radar, whatever. That's not as easy as it sounds, especially if that device doesn't touch the internet, right?
Yep.
Like, so
Right.
having this ability to do revision control and management of code and like, oops, like go back a revision and all that
Yep.
on those types of devices is really special and really useful because who has that? Think about if Amazon ever has a fleet of delivery drones.
Yep. Yep.
How are you deploying new code to those drones, right? Like Palantir, I'm not sure exactly where the boundary between Foundry and Apollo is, but Palantir has found a way to do that elegantly
Yep.
at scale for large enterprises, right? Like,
Yeah. No, exactly. And in
yeah,
closed systems too, like systems that don't have access to the internet, you
wow,
know? So
wow, yeah,
that's,
like
yeah. Yeah.
the Tesla Gigafactory robots, right?
There you
Like,
go. Yeah.
yeah, whoa, okay,
So
like,
like it's crazy. Like when I started to learn about Apollo, um, like I'd read the Seeking Alpha article like over a year ago where there was a really insightful author who said like Apollo might become the most valuable product that they offer. And I was like, what the hell are they talking about? You know?
that's
Like,
my suspicion. Yep.
yeah, yeah. And I was like, wow. When I started to learn more about it, I was like, dude, this is like completely differentiated. Like I don't know anything like this. The closest thing you could point to might be like AWS IoT Greengrass, which is like bunch of components you would load up into your embedded systems that lets it talk to AWS services and can even run like, you can deploy models out through it. But it's a real pain in the ass to use, and it's pretty limited in what it can actually do. But with Apollo, it's like it's a real game changer over that whole space of like dealing with embedded systems and like how do you get this stuff out there and manage it. And it's all under a single pane of glass too. And like what's really cool about it is the way they engineered the protocol inside of the release management thing is like you can create what are called release channels and you can assign risk profiles to those release channels. And then the things that are actually responsible for taking the newly released version of this thing that's in the registry that's running over on the embedded system can decide based on the semantic versioning, like how high of a risk is this deployment? Do I actually want to deploy it or not? Which is pretty crazy.
Wait. Okay, so maybe can you like help me define risk channels? So
Yeah.
is that
Yeah.
like, hey,
So you
different
have like a
code
major
can, yeah,
software update. Like I'm on my Mac, right? And I get
yeah,
like updates all the time from Apple. And whenever they come up with a new OS, I don't want to install that fucking thing because I know like 50 things on my machine are going to break if I go to this major release of a new
high risk
version.
channel. Yeah.
Yeah, that's high risk, right? So like it's a major release. There's probably something that's likely to break if I install this update. So I'm going to skip that one, you know? So like they have a
Or
way
at
for you to
least
do
pause
that.
it, or at least like turn off the
Yeah.
flow on that
Yeah,
channel and say,
exactly.
hey, until I'm ready for it,
Yeah,
don't throw it
exactly.
to me, right? Like,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. And they have a way to roll back if you did screw up. So like let's just say my logic on my release channel said, oh, install it, but it did break. They can automatically roll that back for you. Like there's no one have to worry about it. So it's pretty cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nutty,
yeah.
dude.
So, okay.
Yeah.
I'm getting a much better sense for like the problems that
Yeah.
some combination of Apollo and Foundry are solving.
And
Um,
like I said in an interview a little while ago, I was like, yeah, a company could try and reinvent Apollo, but the problem is the protocol is hard to figure out. Like that protocol of like managing all that, that's fucking hard, man. Like you have to have done it for a long period of time to know what all the caveats are. And like when I read the white paper, I don't know, read about the protocol, I was like, oh my God, dude, you know the amount of work that it would have taken to figure out this is how this protocol should be engineered. It was insane.
I actually think it's like a problem that's unsolvable, right? So it's like
Pretty much, unless you're doing it.
What Palantir basically did and sat down and said is like we're going to generalize all the hardest parts about like SaaS
Yep.
software at
Yep.
scale, right?
Yep.
And then somebody like instead of getting laughed out of the room, they basically said like no, we're actually going to do it. And
Yep.
then they actually funded it and did it. No, I think like no regular human being with a risk tolerance today would take up that ambitious challenge if you didn't already say, hey, it's solvable. Like
Yep.
the thing that Palantir did is they did it in a time where nobody did it. I bet
Yep.
Palantir is going to have competitors now that Palantir exists, just like
Yep.
I expect Tesla to have competitors now that it's like, hey, I've
Exactly.
proven to you this model works, like it's
Yep.
profitable.
Yep.
But that first mover advantage, like how Tesla has with EVs, because they're like,
Yeah.
we're going to solve it while nobody solved it. I'm starting to be convinced that Palantir has that same advantage where it's like
Big time.
the next guy can go generalize this now. I've shown you it's possible, but
Yep.
we're already using this paradigm to do the next thing you can only do when you've already solved this problem, right?
And
Like,
and to bring it full circle, like that's what I was trying to get at, like when I was talking about like quantum field theory and like there's this fundamental layer of reality that's underlying all these problems you're trying to solve. And so like you have all these hammers out there, you have the Databricks, you have the Snowflakes, you have all these other systems for like Ascend.io, and like there's all these companies that are trying to solve these high level problems. Palantir figured out what is the underlying like reality, what is the actual problem you need to solve. And it's like, yeah, we needed a generalized solution for SaaS. We need a generalized solution for how you do edge AI. You know, like they figured that out, and everyone else is going to be running up here in this high level layer when the fundamental reality is much further below that. You know, but by the time everyone figures that shit out, like they're going to have already cornered the market. I think. You know, it's gonna be pretty crazy.
yeah, I'm like trying to think about. I just have so many burning questions. I'm just gonna start rattling them off. So like
All right, go for it.
one thing I didn't really appreciate out of everything we just said is how enterprise Palantir actually is, right?
Yep.
And that's kind of shame on me because all of their investor presentations are big government clients, the biggest enterprises slowly working down to the mid market.
Yep.
Do you think that this is a solution that will ever touch like small and medium sized businesses or even
Oh yeah.
individuals, or is this just too enterprise to even talk about? Like,
No, it's like it definitely will, because like they have there's a good example in this book I'm reading of like a woodworker who was able to leverage Foundry to improve their sales, you know? And so
what?
like, yeah, it's kind of crazy. So because again, you have to remember, it's like if you use Excel today, right, to like manage stuff, and you could actually tap that into a better way of doing Excel, you could actually generate some benefits from the same level of skill that you already have, you know? So like, how could I 10x your Excel skill and make it that much more insightful to where you could find problems you didn't know existed, right? Even in something as simple as woodworking, you know? So like, or not, it's not simple. I don't want to trivialize woodworking. I suck
No,
at
for
it.
sure. Yeah, that's not
You
the
know, it's
point
not.
of
It's
the
a very,
anecdote. Yeah, like,
yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so I'm a guy who has a data lake, and I do,
Yep.
my data. I make it available on my channel all the time. It's Ark Invest's daily trades,
Yep.
back cataloged forever. How do I? I didn't realize a woodworker can get Foundry. Is that something I can get and talk about on my channel? How do I do that?
So they're very selective in who they work with at this point, and I don't know exactly why, but it's really hard to get your hands on the product because they evaluate each person who wants to use it to see if they want to work with them, which is kind of strange. And I shouldn't be telling you things you don't already know, because this has been the general complaint that is out there publicly. Is like, I've applied through the website, they don't get back to me. I want to have access. It's a closed platform, and so I don't think there's any barrier. Like the barrier wouldn't be whether or not you could actually acquire it at a price point probably that you would like. I think the barrier is more like, would they want to work with you? You
Yeah,
know, it's
will
like,
they actually
yeah,
give it to me?
yeah,
I'm gonna apply. I'm gonna be like, hey, I
yeah.
know Codestrap personally. We're best buds. You should give me Palantir right now.
I'm
So
actually trying. So like, I am trying to get Seattle data guy, and I can work to try and get you access. Like, I'm trying to expand the pool of YouTubers that can have access to the platform, and in an effort to start building like the developer community, so that so people in the developer space will get excited.
yeah,
But like this process I went through in getting access to Foundry was new to them, and so they had to like, they're making processes internally to like kind of generalize that. How do we do this the next time around? I think I don't want to get too ahead of myself. So if you guys are watching, but I would like to see if we can generalize that so that we can expand the pool of developers who have access now, under the same terms and agreements that I signed.
yeah, for sure. So yeah,
Yeah,
I got to think about if I'm just throwing this interview on Ticker Symbol Live or what. But like, I would like to get this out there
yeah,
that I'm, a relatively smart, capable guy with programming experience.
yep,
I know how to educate the layman on hard
yep,
technical compute topics, and
yep,
I would do a lot. I feel like I could do a lot of justice to like, here's Foundry, right? Like,
yeah,
here's
yeah,
what's
yeah,
actually going on, right?
yep.
um I'm
Yeah.
gonna.
That's why I reached out to you initially. Is like, I was looking for YouTubers who have a technical background, So I was like, oh, I need to find some, because like that we could really 10x the community in a couple months, in terms of developers that would be excited about Foundry. like I've already 5x'd it at work, you know, like in terms of talking to people and showing them the problems I could solve. Like now they have all these advocates that are starting to grow and inside my org, you know, as people wake up to what it actually does. And then that same phenomenon, I was like, oh man, we could do this on YouTube if I just get the right people together to collaborate on it. You know?
Yeah, I would love to be like a public user of Foundry,
Yeah.
call out real challenges. Like, there's a real need here, I think. You know, a
Yeah.
lot of people talk about Palantir like the stock
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
even the business, but like, I would love to learn about Palantir, the products, the
Exactly.
Apollo, the yeah,
Same.
that's really interesting.
Yeah. I'm psyched, and I'm just like, as I learn the platform, one, I'm appreciative of, like, I'm ahead of the learning curve right now. You know, like, so like I can't see a future in which this doesn't become an in-demand platform like everywhere. So like I'm ahead of the learning curve. But then the other cool thing is like I just start thinking of all the cool shit I could build on it. You know, it's like I think of all the like things that would be amazing to just launch. Like one of them was like, oh man, I could build like a platform like Versal, which is like a place where you can launch Angular or React app, like web applications, but they make it
Yeah.
easy. It's kind of like cookie cutter. They manage it for you. Like, oh my God, this would be such a better version of that because they don't solve the data problems related to that. It's just like a front end kind of solution. And then you integrate with all these other systems. But you could have like this holistic developer platform you could build on Foundry that would just power every web application, you know, which is
I
crazy.
think there's such a crazy like market opportunity
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Why do you think so? Okay, I mean, I have a bunch of related questions to like the way Palantir chooses. So first of all, they choose their customers. That's kind of weird and unusual, right?
I
Like
know. Yeah. I thought so
Facebook
too.
did that back in the day. They only
Yep.
let college students on their platform for a while and they built up
Yep.
demand. Do you think this is about building demand or do you think Palantir is like, hey, we don't know what problem space we're solving first, so we don't want to let people in until we're like sure that that's going to go well. Like, why is Palantir so weird and secretive and like their marketing so esoteric? Like, why not just be like, guys, we have something cool. This could work for you. Let me hook
Yep.
you up, right? Like, why is
Yep.
it the exact opposite of that?
Like let me read it again. I'm speaking for myself. This is speculative.
Totally.
So like just take it with a grain of salt. But like I actually asked that question at one point. You know, like I was like what? I was like, if you can't make this process easy enough for me to acquire it at my work, where like I'm your advocate, like who the hell else are you going to sell this to? Because like if you couldn't give it to us, like then what in the world, like to me
Yeah.
that just blows my mind. And like the person told me like, there's a lot of times when we wish we could tell you, and there's actually a really simple explanation for that. We just can't share it with you. And like, so it's like, there is a reason. I think it's like, my gut tells me it's like, they know they have a really powerful disruptive technology and they want it applied correctly. So they want to work with companies, A, that generate a lot of data and they can easily realize the gains. And then B, I think they don't want it misused. So like they probably wouldn't sell it to a social media company, for example, in my opinion, you know?
That's a reasonable take. So I'm
Yeah.
wondering, where like okay, I'm a woodworker, I'm a YouTuber, I'm a
Yep.
school teacher who wants to leverage some Palantir Foundry Ultralight.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, I can see. Yeah, sorry, in my own head, I'm just like, will they even ever give it to me because I'm a YouTuber? Like,
Oh, I think they would. I think, you know, I just think that they know the potential for misuse. And if you know Carp's stance on social media, which is mine, by the way, like I have a very strong stance on data privacy and misuse and stuff like that.
sure.
So, but if you know about his stance on it, you can see why that would be part of their DNA, like, because of the negative consequences that come with misuse of like, personal data, engagement models meant to drive ad revenue that are using dopamine response and like all that kind of stuff. So so I think that, that's what seems logical to me, but it could be a simpler explanation. Maybe there's some other reason we just don't know about because we don't have, we're thinking 4D chess and they're just like, no guys, it's just this one little thing, like,
My
yeah,
honest guess, besides, so I think that's a really fair guess. My other
yeah,
guess is like, hey man, the cake is 90% baked, but it's not baked, right? Like,
yep,
there's things that break that we talk with our biggest clients about, and until
yep,
we know it's 100%,
yep,
like, because one of the things that like probably no one watching this when it goes live will ever appreciate is like back to that quantum physics example, right?
yep, yep,
When you're solving like tangible problems, you draw a boundary around the problem, you solve
Yep.
everything in the box, you make sure it cleanly touches everything outside the box, and you ship it.
Yep.
When you
Yep.
solve a problem that's like one layer beneath that, the problem space is massive. It takes
Yep.
it's encompasses every type of problem above it, right? Like,
Yep.
it's
Exactly.
very different fixing the foundation of a house and fixing one window in the house, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. For sure.
when your foundation's even a little bit rocky, which,
Yep.
I'm not saying Palantir's rocky, I'm just saying, like, it's an evolving product, right?
Yep. Yep.
They probably don't want a million people having a house party on that house. They're like, guys, we're still dealing with foundational issues and like
Yep.
making sure we set the foundation every time we deploy this house, right? Like, um, so I think there is some element of like, hey, we still stand it up for every client until we
Yep.
can be like, okay, the download button's here and it just works. We don't want a million people getting this or this getting pirated or whatever that even looks like. We
Yep.
want tight control. I
I
didn't
think
really
I think
appreciate that until now.
there's probably some truth to that. I haven't experienced any issues myself on Foundry like that, but like in terms of it being a shaky platform or anything, the I think the also the fact that they're keeping their existing customers and they continue to expand with them probably points to a pretty solid
Yeah, for
product, you
sure,
know.
for
So like,
sure. Yeah, their
but I
net
think there's
dollar
some element
retention's
of
like
what you're saying
40%.
though.
Yeah.
They're very sensitive to negative press. You know, they don't want like trolls coming in and like purposely breaking shit. I would think, or like, you know, getting attacked on some level through like misinformation about their product. You know,
Is that sensitivity due to their like reputation, or is that just like kind of,
probably.
the
I mean, I would think so. You know, I don't know for sure, but like, I think there's just a lot of people who, you know, for whatever reason are going to always attack them. Like that's why they disable comments on their YouTube channels and stuff. It's like there's just so many trolls out there that want to go
dude?
after them. Yeah.
That's something I can relate to as a YouTuber,
Right.
right? It's like
Right.
you'll say everything, and it's like, oh, you made that one little mistake. That
Oh
video's
my
about that
God.
mistake now. So it's like,
Exactly.
I get that. I
Exactly.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Wow. So like, what do you like? Do you use Palantir still today? Like, what is your relationship with Palantir, the product, not
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
company, right now?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, right now we're evaluating it at my work, and we had evaluated it a little while back, like, and just going through demos of the product, and like I was able to like co-pilot, you know, basically do some like pair program kind of stuff, and I really liked it, but a lot of this problems came up. The biggest one being like it's a highly invasive product, you know, that was like and people saying it felt like a spaceship, and we just need to cross the street, you know, kind of thing. But
Yeah.
I told the people making that decision at the time, like, I'm like, you don't realize how complicated the problem space you're in is, you know? So like, to your point about drawing a boundary around the problem, that's great in theory. Like you can do that when you're actually, you know, doing math, but when it comes to an actual system that needs to integrate, you don't get the nice encapsulation problem, you know? Because the real complexity is the network. It's not the
Yeah.
nodes,
Right.
you know?
Yep.
So like, and so like, I was telling them, I was like, you know, when you actually go to
That's a
integrate
great
all these
point.
things, you're going to realize you're in distributed systems hell, you know, and you actually need an orchestration engine to solve this problem for you. And now that we've kind of circled back to that, I think they're starting to realize, oh yeah, you were right. We do have this like really large amount of systems we need to put together, and we need an orchestration engine. We need something that makes this easy, because we don't have time to spend the next year and a half building that. You know,
Yeah.
we need it now.
I
So,
bet what you just described is a
yeah,
problem every enterprise is
yeah,
wrestling with. That existential
exactly.
problem of I can kludge together 10 tools to solve my problem, 100,
Yep,
whatever, right? 10
yep,
tools times the 10 steps of the problem I'm trying to solve.
yep,
Or I can integrate with one company who automates most of this, at
yep.
least out of the box, and understands how to be the glue that holds everything together, for lack of a
And
better
you know what
word.
would be cool is if they just revamped their sales pitch to be that, where they just come in and say, "Oh, you're planning to use this tool, this tool, and this tool. Well, here's the average time it takes. Here's how many of those initiatives fail, or you can be done in 2 weeks, and we have a 90% success rate." You know, like
Isn't that, aren't they just like Zapier for people with real money? Like,
I
you know what I mean?
guess I don't
Like,
know.
I hate kind of saying
Yeah,
that, but like,
yeah,
they seem to be like this glue that's just
yeah,
like, hey, there's Zapier for people with real data, right? Like,
yeah, yeah. And but I mean,
you know,
it's really interesting though. Like, there people don't realize like you don't even need to be like a high tech company generating lots of first party data to take advantage of them. You know, like I think there are lots of problems we struggle with today that are related to the same problem, but in like the SaaS space where the marketing people play, so it's like, I have my Salesforce integration, but then I got Tableau for some reason. And I got this other product like maybe Amplitude or Heap.io for like getting all my telemetry data from my web
Yeah.
apps. And then I've got like, like there's like 15 tools that they're piecing together to try and figure out a holistic view of like what's happening in marketing and sales, and every organization's got that problem. You don't have to be like a technology company to have that problem. Well, Foundry like will simplify that. It'll bring it under one pane of glass, and you'll actually be able to take your same technology skills, but 10x them on this platform. Make it 10 times more meaningful with what you can do with the same set of skills you have today, instead of gluing together like all these other things and getting like halfway insight on it.
Yeah.
Especially as this other trend happens, which is the auto ML capabilities and the transfer learning capabilities. As better base models are produced by vendors in specific areas, you need a lot. Human beings don't need to look at global features at that point. Like, why are you looking at a global feature and trying to determine the impact of that feature, the magnitude of effect from the prevalence? We have models to solve that problem for you. And if you keep reasoning like you are in fucking Tableau about this problem, our business is going to get outcompeted,
Yeah, so like basically it has the ability to say, here are all the real variables of your business and the
Exactly.
sensitivity you have to each one of them, right? Like
Exactly. Exactly. And
that's
it's like
really cool.
that whole way of operating is brand new, but like it affects everybody, because it's like I've
It
been
seemed a
hypercritical of
no-brainer.
like global feature solutions where you're looking at graphs all day and like bar charts and everything. Because I'm like, you're really not getting much better insight than like, maybe you're 20
Yeah.
points above random, but that's not very good in my opinion.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I think let me. I have to do this continually, or else I'll watch this again in an hour, and I'll be like, I had some thought and it didn't make it through. Um, the levers that you think you can. So I'm a small business owner. I
Yep.
for real am a small business owner, and I think that my business depends on things like YouTube views and
Yep.
likes and all these other levers that I can try to pull or get pulled.
Yep.
And it turns out that I have no idea what's worth more to me. One view, one like, one subscribe button press, whatever, right? On my business, on my revenue, right? Like
Yep. Yep.
if I'm Palantir and I plug in my business, which is, that's probably a much more complicated task than I'm giving it credit for. But imagine I could stream all of my business data into Palantir. What
Yep.
Palantir will tell me is actually two things. Hey, here are the actual knobs, not just the ones you know about, but this other variable you probably didn't see before.
Yep.
And actually, if you turn this knob, your revenue goes way up or down. That
Yep.
knob, blah, blah, blah. And this last knob here, you don't care about it at all. So stop putting money into turning that knob, right?
Exactly.
Like
Exactly. Yeah.
that's like really, really important for every
Yep.
business. And
Because
that's
the
kind
hard
of,
part in being able to
yeah.
do that is just to operationalize the data. One, like how do you just even get all of that data into a place in which you can analyze it in real time, and then have the tools at your disposal to make that process easy. So like that's just problem number one. The other is like how do you actually then start, because to tease out the magnitude from effect, like you're actually going to have the magnitude of effect from the prevalence. Sorry, is like you're going to have to do some ML and like go away from just like because YouTube gives you a dashboard, right? Like you can look at all
Yeah.
this stuff in YouTube, but that's again, you're just looking at global features. You don't know how those things interact. You don't know in which the effect of this one feature over here is, like you were talking about, the like button versus this thing versus
Yeah.
this thing. So you'll need to do some ML, but Palantir gives you that, and it gives you a lot of like automatic solutions to some of those problems too. So, which is really cool.
That's cool. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, like
Yeah.
I've talked to the CEO of Wejo, Richard Barlow. His
Yep.
business is stood on top of Foundry,
Yep.
and he mirrored a lot of that same sentiment. Like, dude,
Yeah.
it's not that we couldn't do this ourselves. Like, we're smart
Yep.
guys too. It's that Palantir gets us up and running years before, like based
Exactly.
on how much data, based on what we need.
Yep.
It's this kind of thing. Like this is a solved problem somewhere. And to
It is.
Palantir, that means it's a solved problem everywhere. Like,
Exactly.
which is
Exactly.
really, really
Yeah.
interesting.
It's undifferentiated heavy lifting. It's like Amazon saw the undifferentiated heavy lifting of like getting a compute layer for you and all of that infrastructure, and they're solving a layer above that, which is like the application space. There's so much undifferentiated heavy lifting in big data applications. It's just they figured out a way to make that work. But it's a much more complicated domain in some levels. I mean, it's not more complicated. It's on the same order of complexity when you look at like how do you make a cloud compute for the entire world, cloud computing layer for the entire world. That's a complicated problem. But so it's like, how do you make a abstraction of all applications built on big data? Like,
Yeah. So do you think that Palantir, some combination of Apollo, Gotham, and Foundry abstracted out could get as big as AWS, or is there some fundamental
oh hell
like,
yeah. I mean, it could be
yeah,
bigger than that maybe, depending on what type of value is built on it. So like, I always like try to measure those problems by like, what is the potential value that gets built on top of that solution? Because like the solution itself only goes so far. Like it's I always make it akin to like architecture. Like skateboarders figured out a way to use architecture in a way that original architects like never thought it would ever be used. And so like when you provide the world with a tool like that, a platform like that, what is the potential value that could be built on top of it? But you're talking about like in some cases life-changing technology. Like in the medical space, that could mean like the difference between life and death for a lot of people, or like what's the value of that? And then on the application side, it's like, wow, you could actually have things where human beings don't need to be so central to the software, and things can just happen automatically with a high degree of accuracy. And
yeah,
that, so like it's transformational technology. So it's really hard so when I think about what is the potential value that could be built on Foundry, it's like everything could be rebuilt to be better on top of a platform like this. So it's almost like everything else kind of becomes a legacy solution. And then you look at, and that's what's been driving the ML craze, right? Like ever since 2017, 2018, when it became practical on a cost level to do ML and AI initiatives everywhere as a result of cloud computing becoming available, and you
yeah,
don't have to build the shit yourself. Then everyone started to realize, oh, we can do what Facebook was doing. Like that's a better way of operating. Making data-driven decisions has yielded better outcomes for big tech, for FANG companies, and that's largely why they've been so successful in the market, right? Is that they were able to operationalize big data and figure it out before anyone else. Now
yeah,
everyone's rushing to take advantage of that.
yeah. So this is the next thing they're gonna rush to take advantage of. This
They
is the
already, yeah,
next
the
like
industry already is. They're just running.
it's
Instead of it being this beautiful race, like a bunch of race cars, they're all fucking crashing into each other because they don't know what they're doing. So,
well,
yeah,
and because Palantir is not letting anyone on the track, right? Like there
yeah,
there
yeah,
is this
yeah,
other
exactly.
problem of like,
Yeah, yeah,
right now it's like, hey, okay, I want to do it, like,
yeah, yeah,
but you won't let me.
yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
that's awesome. So yeah, there's like a few things that make me like I'm imagining all the Palantir content that I've put out, and
Yep.
there's definitely a lot of things that I need to like tighten up and clean up and just address. Like, hey, this isn't about finding patterns in data. It's about making data. I'm trying to think of like the couple words I can say to really translate this abstract, really tough like meta problem
It's
of
like it's understanding your business the way you understand weather. Like you can model a complex system like that. So like that to me is really the way what the big data revolution's all about is like, how
yeah.
do I model my business the way I model a weather system? How do I model a complex system and be able to predict things before they happen?
Yeah, I like that. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's the breaking the robot in the gigafactory example and
exactly.
saying, hey, this digital twin thing, and like understanding all of the nuances with what that actually means. Not
Yep.
just like, okay, I delete a robot and now this one metric says I'm 5% less productive, but
Yep.
saying, no, 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 the next bottleneck this creates is here.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yep. And that's why
Um,
they love to give examples about like COVID and supply chain disruption, because that's where that, like, you start to, the value of that system is valuable by itself, but then it's ultra valuable if you're in a crisis. So like if you're in a crisis situation, if you don't have a technology like this, your risk of going out of business is really high, in my opinion.
I
Um,
honestly can't imagine a world where in like 5, 10 years, like now it just makes sense why governments need this first is because like disaster
exactly.
response, like,
Yep.
military, all that. Like this
Yep.
is where you stop measuring things in dollars and you start measuring them in lives, right? So it's like
Exactly. Exactly.
that's where Palantir should now it's all coming full circle for me. Um what is like what yeah, I mean this interview is gonna be 4 hours if I don't like start really thinking about like um what do you think is uh really the next sorry, let me like gather my thoughts
Yep.
here.
No problem.
Um what do you think investors and or people who are just passionate about Palantir in general, whether it's the technology side or whatever,
Yep.
what do you think like the biggest thing that is like, oh man, everyone gets this wrong. What's the one clarifying statement if you had a giant megaphone you would say to everyone who thinks they know something about Palantir, like me,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
doesn't, as I found out in this interview? What is it?
It's not a component, it's an ecosystem. So like
It's an
if you're
ecosystem.
comparing it to Snowflake or fucking Datadog or like don't compare it to an analytics tool. Don't map it to a Gartner quadrant because it doesn't exist. Like there is no market for the big data OS yet. It's people are starting to realize they need it now, for thinking people especially, but like myself or you or other people who are dealing with these problems, but like don't compare it to existing things. If you're out there comparing it or trying to map it to a Gartner quadrant, you are absolutely going to miss the value of this. You know, so it'd be like trying to do that with what is the value of a point and click computer operating system at the time
That's
before that.
exactly where my mind just went. It was
Yeah,
like, you're
yeah,
trying to, it's like I thought we were talking about Excel and we're talking about Windows.
yeah,
We're talking
exactly.
about like what is the value of the graphic user interface in
Yep,
in this in the 60s
exactly,
before right, like,
exactly. Yeah,
that's
yeah,
so interesting. So
yeah. So don't make it
yeah.
don't try and think of it as a component or as a competitor to an existing product because that's not what it is. You know.
Is the thing that Palantir should be run, so like, between edge computing and all of the devices Palantir can run on,
Yep.
naively I think about it as like a thing I load on my computer and operate
Yep.
on, right? Is looking at forward 20 years, is that really where Palantir will be deployed the most, like Windows is on PCs today? You know what I'm saying? Or is it going to be more like Palantir is the thing that like every edge device just runs on because it's the only thing that can? Like, do you think
Yep.
Palantir will stay as a modern operating system, or do you think Palantir will also or have a bigger role in like all the automated shit that's going to happen 20 years from now, delivery drones and like
Yeah. Yeah.
all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff? Where do you see
So,
Palantir's future?
like first it's everything in Foundry that I've seen is all web based, so you can access it in a web browser, and that would include mobile devices and things like that. So like you can access the functionality of Foundry anywhere, like on any device, uh, that you would access anything else on, and it will encompass every person, every actor in your org has a use case on top of Foundry. So like, and they're going to have to learn, obviously learn that platform, but everyone will be using it, and they'll be using it through whatever platform makes them comfortable, whether that's a laptop or it's on their phone or whatever. So like they'll be accessing it in multi-device scenarios, and that'll be part of your daily workflow, and it'll be like part of every person's job in the org to use some piece of Foundry. And so it really will be like the OS equivalent, because I can't really think of another thing that would really encompass every actor and everyone has a use case on it, other than like an OS type of scenario, or maybe Google. Like you can compare it that way, maybe because Google has like Google Docs and they have Google Hangouts and they have like
Yeah.
calendar and email and all this other shit.
I'm thinking of like
Microsoft.
Office 365, right? It's
Yeah,
like here's
yeah,
40
maybe,
apps under one
yeah,
umbrella and
exactly, exactly.
it's like one company manages them.
Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
kind of the right way to think about it. But then you asked another question in there, which is like, well, what is the role they play in the continuing automation revolution? And like whether that's delivery drones or autonomous weapon systems, or it's like, uh, jobs that would have traditionally been done by data analysts to surface signal data that's being done by models now, and we need
Yeah.
those deployed. Because like the big revolution that's happening there is like we want the models closer to where the data is generated.
For
So
sure.
like,
Yep.
yeah, so
That's
like,
yep, no brainer.
but they'll what they are is they're enabling the work product of those things. So like the thing that will actually be deployed out to the drone will be managed through Apollo probably, and the work product, that model or that thing you want to deploy, was created in Foundry. So it's like the end work product of a lot of those things gets
And
spit
it
out.
so it has some compiler or something that says, "Hey, this code is a complete piece of code. Put it on this drone or whatever." Right? Like, go.
They have a registry, yeah. So like all of I don't know what I can say about the actual tech specs of what goes into the registry, but I
Got
know
it.
I can
Yeah. Sure.
state publicly the registry is public. So it goes into a registry and it's available there for install in all those various environments you talked about. So yeah.
Got it. Um. Yeah. I just lost my immediate train of thought was like trying to explain like, what the oh yeah, deploying a model
Yep.
closer to the edge, right?
Yeah.
So like I'm Tesla, I make
Yep.
self-driving cars. if there's kind of like two ways to do that, right? I mean, there's infinity ways to do that, but like
Yep.
there's two paradigms to think about. I have a lot of video data and maybe super hypersonic data or whatever there's if they have
Yep.
sonars or whatever, camera data and radar data, right?
Yep.
I can send it to the cloud, have the cloud compute a solution and tell me what to do next, which
Yep.
requires an internet connection, low latency, and all this other stuff,
Yeah.
low lag, whatever.
Yep.
Or I can deploy something on a chip that all those
Yep.
things connect to in the car,
Exactly.
get the data in there, compute on the chip, which would
Yep.
be Palantir in this case, in this example, hypothetical.
Yep.
And then the chip says, here's the answer, here's what you do next. No internet connection, no worry about latency or bad weather or
Exactly.
anything else that can mess up that connection. That's
Yep.
why I'm asking all these questions like, hey, as more delivery drones, automated cars,
Yep.
robots at the edge, whatever get deployed, is Palantir really? And it sounds like, yes, it's the production solution that would go
Exactly.
get stamped into that little drone, and then somebody with a keyboard on the back end says, hey, time for me to update that drone next time it has internet.
Yep.
Push this update to that chip so
Yep.
that it, you know, whatever.
It's
update
my
it is.
opinion, it's the only platform that's ready to do that, you know, like out of the box and for every problem space in that domain, you know. So like, and we have examples of it already. Like it's being used in wind farms to do exactly that. It's being used on
Yep.
oil rigs to do exactly
Yep.
that. It's being used by Ferrari to do exactly that. It's being used by Wejo to do exactly that. And
That's right.
and so like it is the only, because you have so many problems in there, not the least of which is like, oh, you have 15 million sensors go online and start streaming data all around the same time. That is a massive data stream problem. You know, how do you fucking do that? That's tough. And because not only does it need to be done on device, you still need an immutable log of all of that. You know, you can't just like pretend that it can only live in the car, you know?
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the record keeping. The actual...
Yeah, you have to, because how else are you going to do like a post-mortem on an incident report, but then also like, how are you going to improve the model, you know, in the future? You got to have
forget,
that
yeah, forget the car. It's like when lives are on the line, like this drone makes a mistake or whatever, you know, military application, or, you know, this automated ambulance does something wonky or whatever the use case is, right?
You
Yeah,
got to have an immutable log of all of that data. So like, but that's a big problem. Like, how do you fucking handle that problem? Well, Palantir's got a way for you to handle that problem.
And it's not, I think the real thing, how this comes full circle, sorry, not to interrupt you, is when you have 10 tools stitched together to solve this problem.
Yeah.
And you're trying to do a post-mortem or look back and say what happened.
Yeah.
You're checking 10 non-synced, in the same format logs, right? Like you're doing all this stuff and you're like, I need a team to go look at data from time X to time Y, because I know that's when the event happened, stitch together, do all this other stuff. And because everything's already handled in one spot with Palantir, with Foundry, sorry. So like
that's that lower level problem that everyone's circling around,
I'm starting to really understand that it's not about,
you know, like you must have dealt with this in computer science courses. Like distributed systems are complex systems by definition, you know. So like a distributed computing system is in the category of complex systems for a reason. That shit is hard, you know. And so like if you have 15 things stitched together in a high stakes environment in which like one, you have a high regulatory compliance, B, lives are on the line, and you fuck up just one thing, you know, like, and it's really likely you're going to fuck it up. You know? So like that's the fundamental reality everyone's circling around, and why this stuff is so hard and has an 85% failure rate generally, because like orchestrating that shit is difficult, you know. So like, yeah, that's the fundamental reality people are missing. Like it's just a computer science problem, man. You have the hardest thing, one of the hardest areas of computer science, and now you're trying to leverage machine learning on top of that, you know, which is also hard and easy to get wrong. So like that's why there's so many problems related to current solutions and such a high failure rate. It's just they're not evaluating the science behind it and like looking one level deeper, you know?
Yeah, I think that's just like also a really interesting difference between like the academic approach to solving something on paper and the reality of how problems get solved in reality, right? Like you know, that I didn't appreciate. Yeah, go ahead.
That's where the scientists make fun of the engineers, but without the engineers, none of that shit would ever get done. You know, so
that's right. Yeah, it's a science first. Like where Palantir, I think the real truth is where Palantir works is for engineering. Like in science, when you're just prototyping and you're just like, I'm doing it in MATLAB, I'm doing it in Wolfram, whatever. You have a script that runs and gets you to a solution once, right? Like when you're trying to actually put that on the systems the world operates on, that are interconnected and not the same one thing,
Yep.
you lose that, right? Like the
Exactly.
academic solution doesn't work
It
anymore. You've
doesn't work.
introduced
You
friction and
can't bring it to
latency and
market, you know, like this, and that's where the engineers partner with the
yeah,
scientists, you know?
it's the non-prototype version of these
Yeah,
academic tools for no
exactly.
kidding, deploy this code.
Yep.
I didn't
In a
appreciate
high
that.
stakes
And yeah.
environment where lives are on the line. And they've done, you
Yeah.
know, what's crazy is like coming from the government space where they had to really live up to that promise, like everything else is a fucking cakewalk for them,
That's
you know?
right. That's right.
So
So
like,
like
yeah,
I anecdotally my background's in radars, and a
yeah,
radar
yeah,
is a two-way comm system. And
yep,
the reason I did that is because I had a good academic advisor who said what you just told me.
yeah,
Hey, every other comms problem, which is either one way or two way, is a subset of this problem. So if you
yep,
solve this problem, you're going to be really, really good at all these other problems that are just
yep,
some chunk of this problem, right? Like
exactly,
Palantir
exactly,
is doing that same thing. They're saying, hey, we're taking this really, really hard abstract problem, and if we
yep.
solve it everywhere, whatever your problem is, fits into some subcategory of a problem we have solved with this solution.
Exactly. And this is where it starts
Um,
to get real meta because then you start thinking about like, well, why did it evolve in government? Well, government was the only place where there's really big data
that's
problem.
right.
That's a
Where yeah,
thing. Yeah,
yeah.
you know.
No, that
So
makes total sense to me.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
because yeah, private industry like doesn't private industry is like this isn't
They didn't
profitable. I'm
have that
not
problem.
touching it.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah,
yeah, why
exactly.
would private industry put a man on the moon, right? Like
Plus, it was yeah, it's like it's so cost prohibitive too. Like if you think about how expensive it would have been to do this in the early 2000s, like big data engineering and all that shit, it was like racking and stacking custom server builds, get through one iteration, reorder the whole fucking
yeah,
setup again. You're like,
yeah,
this is a black hole you threw money in, you know?
yeah. And
So,
you can throw
yeah.
money into it forever because
Oh my
like
God, yeah, yeah,
we're finally reaching the point where these things are like tangible and solvable. Like,
exactly,
yeah, man,
exactly.
I have a whole new appreciation for. So, like, I want to go back to one thing you said because I think we're coming full circle here.
Yep,
Um, one of the things that makes Palantir so sticky isn't that it replaces any one tool. The
yep,
problem is whenever you have like three tools that do something very well, but not a tool to do something on either side of that. Like, okay, I've solved this problem with three tools,
yep,
next problem before it, first problem after it, which gets data into that thing, right? You still have this weird problem of like I have a different amount of blocks that I'm required to stitch together to solve this tool.
yep,
Palantir makes that number one. It makes that n
exactly,
equals one blocks.
exactly.
So it's like
Yeah,
the reason it's so sticky is because it's like it's removing boundaries from that system, right?
yep,
Like it's interfaces. It's
yep.
so it's reducing complexity,
Big
right?
time,
Like
big
the
time.
bad kind of complexity, right? The
Yeah,
complexity
exactly,
associated with software
exactly.
not doing everything. Not
Yep.
yeah, so it's like I don't really understand how when they open the floodgates like Facebook did with college students and say, "Okay, everyone can join."
Yep.
I don't know how organizations don't just say we have to be on Palantir. Like,
Especially if they time it right, because like if you figure the early adopters may have like a massive advantage right now. So if you think like the Exxons, the BPs, the Rio Tintos, who are already showing like massive returns in using Foundry, like if you're trying to compete against them 3 years from now, like say this happens in 2025, you know, just hypothetically,
yeah.
you know, like how I mean, my God, like if you didn't adopt it, you'd be screwed. Like you would have no place in the world, you know.
So is
So
Palantir like this is a want to be super clear. This is a
yep,
me saying this from the outside. Sounds
yep,
like a conspiracy theory. Not trying to phrase it that way, but like by if that was true, that this is such an accelerant for a business. When Palantir says we'll let you in but not you, are they picking winners? Like,
this is me being speculative, but there was so Alex Karp said something that I thought a lot of people missed in this one interview he was doing. And the gentleman had asked them like, Alex, are you still going to take the strategy of like let people come to you, let people figure this problem out and come to you, or are you going to be more aggressive about offering a more modular approach that's easier to sell, blah blah blah, And but like in that question, because he was friends with Karp, he had known Karp for well over a decade, worked with him in the government space, like that it reinforces that thesis that like they're picking winners, that they're actually like they know their shit is that disruptive and that good that like if they open the floodgates everyone will adopt it, but like by picking the companies that they want to work with, they can pick the winners they want and build established businesses and spaces that they want to be in, which might be their SPAC strategy too. And then when they do open it, it's like they have sort of, because they're creating a new market, they created it on their terms, with like the companies they want established to work with them.
Yeah, so that definitely sounds good to me as a Palantir shareholder,
Yeah,
but as a guy who fundamentally believes in free markets and like everyone
yeah,
deserves a fair level playing field,
yeah.
what does it mean to have a disruptive technology available to some but not others?
Right,
You know what I mean?
right.
Like I'm trying to wrestle with that as a person who, my main
I mean, it's
mission in life right
conspiracy
now
theory too.
is
Like we don't know if that's right. So like we're just like
well,
I'm speculating, but it could be. It could be.
so I agree we don't know if that's the motivation, but
Yeah.
like if you believe that Palantir is so effective
Yep.
and I think we both agree they do gatekeep their product, let
Yep.
some people in, not let others in.
Yep.
The statement that's being made here is Palantir is selecting who gets the advantage of being on Palantir.
Yeah. That's
I don't
kind
think
of the
that's
way I see
debatable,
it.
right? Like,
Yeah. I mean, it's kind
you
of the
know?
way I see it, but like, I think that is gonna bite them in the ass. Like I've been hypercritical of that strategy on my channel. Like I basically was like how when Cart made that statement in the earnings call that like these companies over here like the Snowflakes, the Databricks, whatever, they're offering solutions we were doing 7 years ago. He said that on the earnings call, and I was like, oh man, well if you could have offered solutions to those problems 7 years ago, then why didn't you? Because that's like 80 billion in market cap if you add up all those companies. So
That's a
like
great
that's a
point.
major oopsie. Like that's the kind of oopsie that usually gets a CEO shit canned. So like, but obviously I don't want to see that. I love Karp. I think he's the absolute perfect person to run that company, and he's a genius on a lot of levels. It's just that like you're either extremely naive and arrogant, or you just really miscalculated on your go-to-market strategy because you should have been modularizing that. And I get why they want the whole platform, like because without you don't get all the benefits unless you take the whole platform. Because like that whole n=1 problem, you
Yeah,
can't turn that into n=12 again.
that's right.
Well, yeah. So it's like, but then you also run the risk because it is a competitive free market that even if your tech is that good and maybe it's only adopted by a handful in the global 2000, that gives them an advantage forever. Maybe you're happy with that, but there are down market pressures that tend to push on that upper end of the market, which include like how many people are actually certified in your tool. Because now you're talking the risk profile again, which is like, if I don't have a large pool of engineers who are actually trained on your product and want to use it, doesn't kind of matter how good it is. It's an unsupportable product. Like this is why Rapids, like, are you familiar with Dask and Rapids in machine learning?
No, I'm not.
These were like two technologies that kind of worked together in embedded systems on like NVIDIA chipsets and stuff. But it was like far more performant than
Oh,
Spark, right? But
yeah.
like at the time it came out, like there was no enterprise support for it. So like companies wouldn't use it because they perceived it as risky, which it was because there was no enterprise supporting the thing. It was just an open source project basically.
Yeah.
So like companies are like, fuck that. Like I don't have people trained in it. I don't have people who can troubleshoot it. Like if the perception is that if I adopt this platform, like I can't, I don't have a broad hiring pool. It costs me too much money to interact with this one company. If they ever go out of business, I'm screwed. Like if they don't actually start to reshape their go-to-market strategy to deal with like the reality of selling to people in IT who are hyper sensitive to this risk profile problem, doesn't matter how good your tech is, it'll never gain widespread adoption.
That's right.
So like they can't be naive about like the implications of their go-to-market strategy and like the fact that it could lead to a problem later on where no one wants to use their platform, even if it is that good.
Do
And
you
and
think
human
this
beings are
was
stubborn.
like more naivete, or do you think it was just like, hey, we're keeping the long-term end goal in mind, and we're not going to offer certifications until we know what we can and should be certifying? Like,
Don't
and I
know.
realize it's all speculation, but it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
do you think there's a version of this where it's more like, hey, we know what we're holding on, and we know nobody's coming in and disrupting it. We're going to get it perfect, or like, not really. That's not.
I think this is the question I posed in the interview recently. I was like, why do CEOs get fired? Like CEOs don't get fired because they you can't give them a logical explanation to why something might work or not work, whatever. Like CEOs are generally the kind of people are like the front man of a band. You know what I mean? Like they have an opinion and they believe they're right, and they will follow that opinion off the cliff with the company with it until they hit the bottom. So like CEOs do not change their minds. They very much believe they're right, and they very much are not going to compromise on the execution of that mission. Good ones anyway. And so like I think that's both a plus and a negative. That's the kind of quality you have to have in someone responsible for that level of leadership. But it can also be disastrous, which is why I've never seen a CEO be reformed. The board just fires them. So it's like,
Yeah, that's a
you
good
know,
point.
but
That's a
so
good
the
point.
point on the strategy, I think it's like they have a strategy they believe will work, and I thought it was really big of Carp to admit that like they had failed on some level to not capture the market for those products they were offering a long time ago. So that also points to some really good qualities there, like in their leadership. But I think they believed they were right. Is my thought. It's speculative.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Yeah. No, for
Right.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, this is all like I have a much better, deeper appreciation for Palantir, for Foundry, for definitely Apollo. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
what a
Yeah.
sleeper product that nobody's
Right.
talking about.
Yep.
For the types of problems that Foundry does and does not solve, and how it goes about doing that.
Yep.
Is there anything else you want to tell me, share, talk about? Like,
I just want, yeah, like the getting the developer community going. Like I think that would be really cool to like work on as like a project between a few YouTubers, and like get that off the ground. Because I think if we could generate, enough people who are learning the platform and then like showcasing it, it would do a lot to like solve some of these issues for Palantir. I think.
this is probably a dumb question. Like,
Yeah.
if I happen to get my hands on Palantir,
Yeah.
you might
Yeah.
not even be the right person to answer this, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Can I stand a business on top of it, or is it just
That's
like an
what I want to do.
evaluation? Is it like an evaluation only copy? Like, what is that?
I mean, the one
actually-
I have is like, I can't tell you the kind of environment it's in, but it wouldn't be where I would run a production workload. So it wouldn't
Yeah.
be like the thing you would, but what's cool is the stuff I build in there, you can absolutely like export it for use in another Foundry instance, which is really cool.
Yeah, I
So,
have a couple ideas for a couple good web apps.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's like, if I could get it powered by Foundry,
yeah.
all this, like, I bet there's some really interesting stuff in the problem
I
space.
have like a model. I just want to build every app I build in the future on top of Foundry. Like I already have a design, like an architecture I know will work, which is really cool.
And well, you don't have to answer this if you don't want, but Palantir's
Yeah.
just not letting you do that. They're saying like, no.
No,
we're
they're
not
they're
interested in
letting me do that for sure. Like there's sample apps I'm going to build on the Foundry in Action series. That'll be a good reference for the type of architectures I want to build on there. But yeah,
That's so cool.
it
Yeah,
is really cool, man.
there's a lot of man. I would love
Sankar
to.
was right. Like when he said, what AWS was the last 10 years for developers, that's what Foundry will be in the next 10 years.
I would
Like,
love to. Yeah. I would love to be a part of that community. I gotta figure out. I don't know what I'm gonna. My guess is what I'm actually gonna do is put a thumbnail on this, film a little intro, and say I'm putting this on Ticker Symbol Live, and it's exactly for one person. Whoever in Palantir makes the decisions of whether to give me Foundry, watch this. I understand it. Give it to me, and I'll make the world.
And you have the
understand it.
technical background, like coming out of MIT. You were in MIT, right?
So I went to school at a school called Stevens for electrical engineering. I did 8 years at MIT as a staff scientist, as an associate staff scientist.
Awesome.
So I got paid by MIT for research. I wasn't a student there.
Yeah. And you have all the technical background, so like to me, like that would be the perfect person to start looking at this platform. And like you've already dug so deep into the insights portion of like, whoa, and you jumped to the solutions before I even had to like tell you what they were. So like I already know that you'd be like the perfect person to be working on this thing. So it's like, yeah, if you guys, I know I know they'll watch this video, by the way. So like if you're watching,
I will put this up. Yeah. I'm going to put it up raw, unedited. Yeah. So right now, me and you are in recording only mode because I didn't know, totally. It's good. I'm going to throw this on live. I'm going to start linking it to people. I'm going to let people know what's up, man. This is super cool. I'd be happy to have you on this is going on Ticker Symbol Live. My main channel is obviously Ticker Symbol U. If you want to do a more refined, formal, more PG version of this interview, sometime I'm happy to. If not, I'm going to try to edit chunks of this and make it into a video too as well.
Let's do some reaction videos. Like when after I release like some of these Foundry in Action things, it'd be cool to get your reaction to like what you're seeing in the videos and stuff.
I would love to. Yeah, that's the next thing I was going to say. I'd love to keep in touch. I'm happy to be on your channel. This is super awesome. You have a real awesome opportunity here. Like I definitely think you're one of the right shepherds for this community too, just based on the way you're telling the story. So I hope you keep at it. Keep getting on big YouTubers channels, man. This kicks ass. This is really cool.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it, man. I'll talk to you.
I'll talk to you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.